Today, the topic we are going to discuss is cost to company. We know what is compensation and we know what is benefits. So we are going to talk about a most important component of compensation of a company, that is CTC, or cost to company. What is cost to company? Cost to company is basically the total cost which a company decides to spend for an employee in an entire year. So CTC per annum, or cost to company per annum, is the total cost of a company for a single employee. Now, when we are talking about the CTC, it is divided into different components. CTC is not a single figure, but it is actually divided into different components. Let us now see what are the different components of CTC. The most important and the first component is called as basic. This is the common component that most of the company, or I should rather say all the company, they include in their CTC structure, which is basic. Now, how much should be the percentage of basic? The percentage of basic can be anything between 30% to 60% of total CTC. That means if my CTC is, let's say, 5 lakhs, my basic can be anything between 30% to 60% of 5 lakhs. Let me take an example that in my company, my basic percentage is 50% of 6 lakhs. That means my basic will be 3 lakhs. So CTC is 6 lakhs, basic is 50% of 6 lakhs. The ultimate final basic amount will be 3 lakhs. Now, let me tell you one thing very clearly in this particular video. When we are talking about different components of CTC, we are not going to talk about the tax implication of them. Like what will be the tax implication of basic or whatever the tax implication of any other component, we are not going to discuss in this particular video. We have another video which will help you to learn different tax implicability of each and every components of CTC separately. So we have discussed about basic. The next component is going to be discussed is DA, or Dearness allowance. What is DA? Before I talk about DA, let me tell you this particular component is not a part of the CTC in private sector employees. 99% of the private sector, they do not include DA as a part of their CTC structure. This particular component of Dearness allowance is offered by the government against the cost of living and inflation. So generally DA is a percentage of basic, and I repeat again, DA is mostly offered by the government employees in the public sector, which is a percentage of basic to manage the cost of living and to manage the inflation. But in case of private sector employees, mostly they do not have any DA in their CTC structure. The next we are going to talk about conveyance allowance, or we may also call it transport allowances. If your company is not offering a pick and drop facility, then the company may offer you conveyance allowance or transport allowance. What is conveyance allowance? Conveyance allowance is basically the amount that the company is going to pay you against the transportation cost from residence to your office or from office to your residence. Now, this amount is mostly 1,600 per month or 19,200 per year. Now you can ask me, why 19,200? Why not 20,000? Again, we are not going to talk about this in this video. Why? Because this is related to the Income Tax Act. Why the conveyance allowance should be 19,200? That has a link with income tax calculation, which we are going to talk about in our next video. So as of now, remember this: conveyance allowance should be or maybe 19,200 per annum. The next component is LTA or leave travel allowances. What is LTA? LTA is basically an allowance which the company offers you to reimburse the amount if you go for a holiday trip along with your family, or if you go alone, you can also get the amount reimbursed. LTA is an amount which is there in the CTC structure that can be reimbursed by the company as per the Income Tax Act, depending on some other parameter, which again we are going to discuss in our next video. As of now, you have to understand that LTA can be a part of your CTC structure, and there is no such fixed amount that the company can include in this particular component. It can be 15,000, 25,000, or maybe 30,000. But again, why and how the amount to be decided, that is going to implement in the tax session in the next video. So what are the components we have seen so far? We have talked about the basic, which is 30 to 60% of the total CTC. We have spoken about the DA or Dearness allowance, which is not mostly a part of the private sector employees. Then we spoke about conveyance allowances, which is 19,200. We have spoke about LTA, leave travel allowances. Another receivable components in CTC is HRA or house rent allowance. What is house rent allowance? HRA is basically the amount that you are spending for your rented house. And if we need to calculate that as a part of our CTC structure, it depends on which location that you are staying. If you are staying in a metro location, then the HRA should be 50% of your basic. And if you have a DA, then 50% of your basic plus DA. And if you are staying in a non-metro location, then the HRA should be 40% of your basic plus DA. So let me take an example. Suppose your basic is 1 lakh and you are staying in Kolkata location, which is a metro location. That means you are staying in a metro location and you are entitled for a HRA of 50% of your basic. If the basic is 1 lakh, then your 50% of HRA will be 50,000. But if you are staying in a non-metro location, for example, if you are staying in Bhubaneswar, then your HRA will be 40% of your basic, that is 1 lakh. That means it will be 40,000. So HRA is having a link with the income tax again, which we are going to talk about in the next video. The next receivable components is medical allowance or medical reimbursement. Yes, medical allowance and medical reimbursement are not exactly the same. They have different implication on the income tax, but as of now, let me talk about both of them together. This is an amount which is fixed, and company will offer this amount as a part of your CTC structure. Generally, the amount is 15,000 per year, which is having a dependency on the income tax, but it can be less than 15,000 or more than 15,000, but generally it is 15,000 based on the tax implication. The next receivable amount that we are going to talk about, other allowances. If we are talking about the CTC structure, there are different types of allowances available in the industry. What kind of allowances that you are going to use in your CTC, that depends on your company policy. There is no such rule that what are the allowances that you can use and what are the allowances you cannot use. Let me see a list of available allowances that you may use or you may include in the structure of your CTC policy. So some of the allowances that you can actually use in your CTC structures are entertainment allowance, overtime allowance, city compensatory allowance, interim allowance, project allowance, tiffin or meal allowance, cash allowance, warden allowance, servant allowance, uniform allowance, etc. So these all are the allowance that you can use in your CTC structure to make it more comprehensive and competitive. So there is a debate whether the variable can be a part of CTC or not. There is no such yes or no answer for this. That depends on completely on the policy of the company, whether they want to include the variables like bonus or incentive in the CTC or not. Yes, incentive should not be, if you ask me personally, incentive should not be a part of the CTC, but bonus, mostly the performance bonus, can be a part of the CTC. So I will leave this on the policy of the company whether they want to keep the performance bonus as a variable in the part of CTC or not. But if you want, you can. For example, suppose I have decided to have a performance bonus of, let's say, 10% of my basic in the CTC. So if my basic is 1 lakh, I can have 10% of 1 lakh, that is 10,000, as my variable performance bonus in my CTC structure. Now let us talk about the non-receivable part of CTC. What is non-receivable part of CTC? Non-receivable part is the option, or they are the components which the employee will not receive on regular basis. That means whatever component that we will add into the non-receivable category, the employee will not receive them regularly. They will not receive them on monthly or quarterly basis. Yes, they will receive them, but after a certain period of time, basis on the policy or basis on the government act. Now, what are the components that we are talking about that we will include in the non-receivable part? Number 1, gratuity. Now again, it's a debate whether we can include gratuity in CTC or not. But yes, there is a clear-cut instruction by the court that as Gratuity Act 1972 does not specifically mention whether this gratuity can be a part of CTC or not, it will be completely decided by the company. So, if the company wants, they can include gratuity in the CTC. If company doesn't want, they may not include gratuity in the CTC. Let us assume that in our example, gratuity is included in the CTC. So how much will be the percentage? Now I would like to take your concentration here, because in gratuity calculation there are 2 parts. One is when the company is appointing someone as employee, that means during the joining of an employee. And gratuity also will be calculated after certain period of time when the employee will resign or retire from the company. So when the company will appoint someone, that means when someone is going to join the company, and if the company decides to include the gratuity in the CTC structure, that calculation will be called as entry formula of gratuity. When the employee will resign or when the employee will retire from the company, that time how much gratuity he will get, that will be calculated by the exit formula of gratuity. So there are 2 different formulas of gratuity. One, entry formula during the joining of an employee, and exit formula when the employee will retire or resign from the company. So now at this moment we are talking about the CTC designing. That means we are talking about the entry formula of gratuity. And how much is that? That is 4.81% of basic plus DA. I repeat, the entry formula of gratuity is 4.81% of basic plus DA. And this particular amount will be incorporated will be added in the CTC structure under non-receivable components. Let us take an example of entry formula of gratuity. Let us consider that the basic is 1 lakh. That means if I have to calculate the entry formula of gratuity, it will be 4.81% of 1 lakh. That means it comes to 4,810. So this amount of 4810 will be added in the CTC structure under non-receivable components.